All right, ladies and gentlemen, we have our last speaker of the day. For many of you, you know Callie Blackwell very well. We're going to be talking about life after death. And for those of you who don't know, Callie is an advocate for a healthier and more holistic lifestyle as a means to prevent many diseases, including cancer. When Callie's eldest son was diagnosed with cancer for the second time in 18 months, she embarked on a long, steep learning curve. A 6-year journey through the complexities of chemotherapy and bone marrow transplants to diet, nutrition, herbal and holistic medicines. So I'm looking forward, as somebody whose parents both died of cancer, I'm looking forward to your story.
Hi everybody, so thanks ever so much for coming. First want to say that, and right at the end of the day, so it's lovely to see that you hung around. So this is only the second time I've done this talk with presentation, with pictures and things like that. So I'm going to do my best not to get muddled and things like that. So if you can bear with me, that'd be great. So I'm going to talk about life after death. And I think before I can talk about the life that's come after, we have to talk about the death. And so I want to tell you a story. This is my son, Darren. And he was born in 1999. And in 2010, at the age of 10 years old, he was diagnosed with acute lymphoblastic leukemia. And unfortunately, 18 months later, while still on active chemotherapy, he was diagnosed with a second cancer called Langerhans cell sarcoma. Now, this made him the only person in the entire world to have the two cancers together. And because of that, they had no protocol. They didn't know what to do with him. So they decided that he would have a bone marrow transplant. So Darren had copious amounts of chemotherapy, radiotherapy. He had to have a mask fitted because the second cancer turned up in his tonsils, so they had to do targeted irradiation as well. And on the 1st of March 2013, Darren had his first bone marrow transplant. But unfortunately, that one didn't work. And neither did the second one, and neither did the third one. And then we were told that the fourth one probably wasn't going to work either. Now, unfortunately, after Darren had his fourth and final transplant in October 2013, 3 days later, he trapped his fingers down the side of his bed and he picked up 2 catastrophic infections in his hand and 1 in his mouth. And I will warn you, the pictures aren't very pleasant, so I won't stay on them for very long. But basically, the infection in his mouth was called Klebsiella, and it started to eat away at his tongue. And his hand, the 2 infections he had in his hand, one was herpes whitlow and the other was called cellulitis, and it rendered his hand useless. He was in agony, as you can see. But the worst thing was, I won't leave it there for long, but the worst thing was that this was now affecting the uptake of his fourth and final transplant. There was no way that his transplant could take whilst his body was being ravaged by infections. So Darren was in a very, very bad way, and they told us that really there was nothing else they could do for him. And if you have an engraft with a bone marrow transplant after 50 days, then it's not going to happen. And so it was in December, that was December the 1st, 2013. That was Darren celebrating his 14th birthday. And then 2 days later, we signed the Do Not Resuscitate forms, and they asked us to go to a hospice. So I signed the Do Not Resuscitate forms, and we looked at the hospice, and on December the 11th, 2013, we moved to a hospice. Now, Darren was being kept alive by blood transfusions, by many antibiotics. They were telling us that the only thing keeping him alive was the antibiotics. And so I asked them, when I take him away from what I called a conscious life support machine, because he was aware, he was awake, he knew what was going on. When I asked them how long we would have when I took him away from this conscious life support machine, I was told 3 days, a week at most, if I was lucky. So we moved him to a hospice, and on December the 14th, which was the 3 days, we had Christmas. And then we had another Christmas. And then we had a New Year. But unfortunately, Darren's organs had started to shut down, and he was becoming increasingly anxious because the impending death wasn't coming quick enough for him. He was suffering incredibly. And so on day 69 days after he had his last and final transplant, Darren was still around, but he was getting increasingly anxious, and they actually tried to up the morphine. And so they were upping the morphine, they were giving him more sleeping tablets. And Darren had made a death plan. I'd say it's something that everybody who's in their right mind will make when they move to a hospice. And so he had said in his death plan that he didn't want to die on morphine because they'd taken everything else from him and they weren't going to take his death. And so as his mother, his last dying wish was to die not in a morphine haze, I felt I had to try and protect him and do what I could do to help him. So on day 69, I asked for a bone marrow aspirate to be done, and I basically said to him, look, how is he still here? He shouldn't still be here. You told me 3 days. And they said, well, we'll do a bone marrow aspirate, but the chances are there's probably nothing in there. And on day 69, lo and behold, they came back and they said, there's nothing in there. You just have to wait now. Something will get him. So, unfortunately, obviously, because he was on all this morphine and things like that, I decided to look into cannabis. And I'd looked into cannabis about a month beforehand, when actually with his hand, I have to go back a little bit now, you see, I've gone ahead of myself. But with his hand, you can see it's so heavily bandaged, because what they actually did, they did a neurectomy. Now, first of all, they wanted to amputate the whole hand, and I pleaded with them and said, please don't amputate his whole hand, he's dying. I just want him to die pain-free. And they had him on fentanyl, they had him on morphine, they had him on everything. He couldn't have anything else. So before amputation, I actually asked for Bedrocan, which is a cannabis-based product that's available from the Netherlands, and I was told it wasn't licensed for children. Neither is chemotherapy, by the way, but they still do that. So I was told no to Bedrocan. So at that time, I actually looked and thought, well, cannabis, how hard can it be to get hold of that? So I did. And we made a tincture, and I put it in a vape pen. But it wasn't strong enough to deal with his pain. I didn't know what I was doing. I was very naive back then. And unfortunately, it hadn't worked. But I still let him have the vape pen in hospital. He thought he was, really clever, vaping an illegal drug inside a hospital. But it wasn't doing anything to him, not that we could tell. So on day 69, day 70 came, and they told us that there was absolutely nothing in his bone marrow. So Darren became more anxious, and they tried to give him morphine again. And I thought, well, cannabis chills you out. So what if I just give him loads, like not in a vape pen, but what if I just put it under his tongue? So I did. I drew up 5 mils of this tincture, and I put it under his tongue. And within half an hour, he just chilled out. And within half an hour, I saw his whole demeanor just change. It was like a wave going through his entire body. And from that moment on, he had no more morphine, no more sleeping tablets. And so to me already, it was an exit drug. It was getting off all the harmful things that were going to kill him in a way that he didn't want to die. And so I continued to give him this cannabis tincture. And actually within minutes, I think it was half an hour later, when the nurse turned up at the door, actually, with a drug called cyclazine that he'd become incredibly addicted to. I mean, I've never seen anybody addicted to a drug like he was to that. He was clucking, and he would scream at the nurses if they didn't have it on time. And there she stood at the door, right on time. And I thought, oh my God, what have I done? I could kill him. I don't know whether there's contraindication. I had no idea. And I didn't need to worry, because Darren turned round and told her to take it away because he didn't want it. And I looked at her, and she looked at me, and I said, for God's sake, take it before he changes his mind. And so from that second on, he never had that drug again either. So already for me, this was a miracle. This was going to give my son the death that he so wanted, and the death that we as a family, after 4.5 years of hell, deserved to have. But it didn't stop there, because after 5 days of giving him this cannabis tincture and nothing else, there was nothing else that he was having. It was palliative care. Darren had been told, do not take those bandages off. Oh, you've seen the pictures, how horrendous they were. Do not take those bandages off. They are necrotic. We have debrided virtually down to the bone, and they must be dealt with in a surgical procedure. And after 5 days of giving him a cannabis tincture, one day his bandage came off his finger. And you can imagine the horror when we saw that. That's not possible without a functioning bone marrow. That's not possible. You can't even replace dead skin cells without a functioning bone marrow. So this is not possible. So the doctors said we need to do a blood test. And I said, 5 days ago, you told me there was nothing in there. Literally 5 days. If it's not in his bone marrow, it's not in his blood. So, but they didn't want to believe that. They wanted to look at his bone marrow again. So he went in for a blood test. And 5 days previously, his neutrophil count, now the neutrophils are the white parts of the white blood cells that fight infection, basically. And his white neutrophil count 5 days previously was 0.005. And 5 days of cannabis tincture and nothing else, it was 0.25. It was there, it was very small, but it was there, and it was enough to do something. So the doctors said it was a miracle because they didn't know what I'd done, and I sure as hell wasn't going to tell them, because if I had told them, I was terrified that not only would social services come in and take my children, but now Darren would lose the one thing after all of this that was clearly going to work for him. So I had to keep very, very quiet, and I couldn't say anything. Some of the nurses knew what we did, but I didn't make it common knowledge. But unfortunately, things got worse. And I hate seeing this picture. So unfortunately, things got worse because when Darren didn't die, and he'd been promised a release from all the pain and suffering that he'd been in for many years, he decided that he was going to try and kill himself. And his route of trying to kill himself was through starvation. And so he just refused to eat. And now there was one thing, cancer's one thing, it's one thing you have to deal with. When your child, you've just saved their life, and he hated me for it. He absolutely hated me for it because there was no promise of a solution. There was no promise that he was actually going to get better from this. In fact, the hospital sat down and said to him, you could drop down dead next week. We have no idea. Now, for a child that had seen what death could bring him, which was an end to the suffering, to now be told, well, actually, you're not dying, but we don't know what's going on here. It was horrendous for him. It was absolutely horrendous. And their answer was they wanted to section him, force feed him, and sedate him. And I said to them, can we not have some mental health care? And they told me he didn't qualify. So therefore, I had to take it upon myself. And a friend of mine had a villa in Spain, and they said, look, bring him over to Spain. Now, by this time, I'd actually stopped giving him the tincture because his immune system was really good. His body on a cellular level was starting to recover, but him on a mental level, it wasn't. It was deteriorating tenfold. And the cannabis I was giving him wasn't giving him the munchies. So I kind of just stopped, and I didn't really think any more of it. And then I went to Spain, and I met with quite a prevalent cannabis activist who gave me a gram of FICO, RSO, whatever you want to call it. And he said to me, just put a tiny bit on a cracker and get him to eat it. And I really, really think this is going to help with his appetite. I really think. And lo and behold, it really did. And I gave him the oil, and within half an hour again, I was upstairs, I was prepping some lunch, and I shouted down, I'm making some lunch, does anybody want anything? And I kind of expected to get the usual grunt that I'd had for the last 6 months. And Darren shouted up, yeah, make me loads, I'm starving. So I made him loads of food, and he ate for 12 hours that day, and the next day, and the next day. And we would take him down to the restaurants. My youngest son knew what was going on. We would take him down to the restaurants, and Darren would order an extraordinary amount of food, and they would look at me, and they'd say, is he sure he's going to eat this? Oh, yeah, he will. And he did. And we went back to the hospital after 2 weeks in Spain, and the lead oncologist took us to one side and said, I can't believe it. Darren's mental health has improved by 300%. And I said, yeah, I know. And she said, yeah, but he doesn't want to die anymore. And I said, yeah, I know. And she said, and he's put on 4 kilos. I said, yeah, I know. And she said, my God, the holiday did him worlds of good. I said, yeah, it was the holiday. Because again, my child was still only 14. I could not tell them what I'd done. I couldn't. There was no way in the world. And today, Darren is nearly 20. And he has taken 150 milligrams of cannabis oil, full extract, of an equal of THC and CBD every single day since June 2014. And I won't stop him taking it because it's the only thing keeping him alive. And it's the only thing that's helped him recover in the way that he has recovered. So since then, his hand, they told me he'd never use his hand again. They said, when I asked for neurectomy, they said, oh, well, that's rather permanent. And I said, well, yeah, so's amputation, but let's just give it a go. So they told me he'll never feel that hand again. He'll never use his fingers again. And I said, I don't care. Well, 2 weeks after we came back from Spain and Darren was on oil every single day, he started to tell me that his hand was hurting. I said, your hand can't hurt. It's impossible. There's no nerves. They've cauterized the nerves. And he said, Mum, I'm telling you, my hand's hurting. I've since found that's called neurogenesis. So THC specifically can actually cause neural pathways to regrow around damaged areas, which is why we see people who've had strokes who can recover 100% from their stroke. It's a damaged part of the brain. It will regrow. And so since then, I decided to write a book to tell everybody what I did. I want everybody to know that just because they say there's nothing more that they can do, it doesn't mean there's nothing more that you can do. And I really want everybody to know that because I truly believe that we can inspire people to go on and help themselves and help others. And so I wrote a book and I dragged Darren on the TV with me. We went on Loose Women, went on this morning, sorry. Then we went on Loose Women. And we've been outside protesting outside Parliament. We go to Parliament quite a lot, and we go, and I go to many events, and I've started to drag Darren along with me. I protest a little too hard sometimes, but it's got to be done. And Darren joins me on speaking arrangements now, and I get him to do some talking, because I fully believe that my story is one thing. My story is my story that I had with my son's journey, but his story is something else entirely, and I don't know what it's like to feel when you are faced with your impending death. I don't know what that feels like. So going on to what I do now, I have set up an organisation with my dear friend JJ sat in the front, and we now go out of our way to help people obtain the illegal cannabis oils that I give to my son. Because if it works for him, it works for other people. And so I couldn't, with a clear conscience and a closed mind, I couldn't turn my back on the many people that then came to me after that and said, my God, what did you give him? I need to know. My son is dying, my auntie, my uncle, my niece, my nephew, my dog. Everybody came to me because they saw a miracle, and I had to tell them what I did. And so from there on in, for the last 6 years, I've been helping people get access to illegal cannabis oil. And for the last year, along with JJ, we've actually been actively getting in oils, making up blends, getting everything tested. We do everything we can in an illegal market as clinically as we can. It's still medicine. People are still taking it, and it still needs to be clean and organic and pure. We don't want any rubbish, you know. It's not medicine. If you put tobacco with it, it's not medicine. You put pesticides, it's not medicine. It's not going to do you any good. So we go out of our way, and we've this organisation called the Darling Buds, and we actively help people break the law. I don't know how many times a day. I've lost count. But that's what I do now. And and so, yeah, my book, I would love for people to go and buy my book and just spread it around, share it. I make 11p per book, by the way, so I'm not trying to sell them. But the story in itself is incredible. It's 4 years of a journey of hell and highs and lows, lots of highs. And yeah, I mean, that's so basically what I do today as a cannabis activist is I go out of my way to help people. I teach people how to grow. I teach people how to make oil. We then get it in, we test it for them so that they know what they're doing is right. We then teach people everything from soil to oil and everything in between. And that's basically why I'm here today, to spread the news and to tell everybody that there's something that you can do. That's it. Thank you. And I think I've got to throw it out to some questions. Because if anybody got any questions for me about anything, about I do not diet and nutrition as well, and we talk, when people come to me, cannabis won't do everything on its own, right? So it has to be a healthy lifestyle as well. If you're going to keep eating McDonald's and you're going to have cannabis, don't complain when the cannabis doesn't work.
All right, so we have our first question.
Speaking on that exact subject, what would you say to people that are trying to utilize cannabis as a panacea or a cure-all without accepting the causes of their illnesses and obviously the detrimental behavior they still engage in?
Yeah, that's the thing. So people have to really understand that they have to be willing to stop the things that made them sick in the first place. And we know that processed foods are no good for us. We know that fizzy drinks are no good for us. Yeah, we still do them because they're nice. But unfortunately, these things cause illness. And then many people, especially with the media now, saying that cannabis is, using the word cure. I hate that word. It's not a cure. It's a very highly effective treatment with... Exactly. It's not a cure. It's a highly successful treatment with minimal detrimental side effects, which the same cannot be said for conventional treatment for cancer. So I would say to people, it's got to be a whole. It's a holistic. If you're ill, seriously ill, and you want to use cannabis, that's great. But you have to look at everything else as well. You have to look at your diet, your nutrition, your stress levels, what you're doing in your life. It's a holistic thing. And unfortunately, cannabis won't work on its own. Not as effectively as it could do if you gave it your all.
Any other questions? Anybody? Yep.
Thank you.
Has there been any reaction from the medical community or interest from medical community or cooperation maybe after this your story?
Do you mean in the aspect of wanting to help me or things like that? So the medical community, actually, I do try and get involved with it. And I know a lot of doctors and people like that. And actually, it's funny you should say that because doctors have started referring people to me. I'm not even joking. I've had 5 or 6 in the last week have said, oh, Dr. such and such is a doctor, or my doctors. I'm like, oh, okay. I'm breaking the law. But do you know what that tells me? It tells me that they can't do what they know they should be doing. They can't do what they know they should be doing, and they want to, but they can't. So they do the next best thing, and then they send people my way, knowing that I will be able to help them, because I'm not risking losing my doctor's job or anything like that. So the medical community have been very welcoming, very open, and very willing to help me spread this story as well. I have many doctors who tell people about this story. So I'm very, very pleased with the medical side. Corporations, I've had a number of people try and throw money at me, but unfortunately they wanted me to throw my friends, the black market, under the bus, and I wasn't willing to do that, so hence I'm still poor.
Do we have any other questions for Callie? Oh.
You're going to look like a plant.
I'm not, honestly. I'm just curious to what the audience and what people listening to this story and watching this video, what they can do to support your work and you as an individual.
I guess, like we said earlier on the panel when we were talking earlier, what I really need people to do is help the people around them so that I don't have to. When aunties and uncles and nieces and nephews come to me and things like that, why aren't their family helping them? Because they're scared. They're scared of the law. Also, the education isn't there. So people get very scared. They don't know. They feel that they don't know how to grow. They feel that they're going to get arrested. I send tinctures to people sometimes, and they'll say to me, I sat there and I thought SWAT was going to come through the window, and I'm like, no, that's not going to happen. We've got to, the fear is very, very real. And so what I would love for people to do is take responsibility for themselves and help their community so that those people in the community can stay within that community and they don't have to come to me, because my resources are so stretched. It's unbelievable. JJ and I have to play God literally every day with people who come to us and we just simply don't have enough oil. So the other thing, if you're a grower and you grow organically and things like that, and you want to donate some oil and stuff my way, I'd quite happily take that on, because I'll have it tested and we can do stuff like that. But yeah, I guess just as we said earlier, tell everybody, plant a seed. If you hear somebody down the street bad-mouthing cannabis, give them 2 minutes of your time and free the weed. Give them 2 minutes of your time and tell them, explain to them, educate them. Because unfortunately, if we don't educate people, then it's going to go to the hands of the people who actually don't know what they're talking about, and they're going to have the ears of the public. And we don't need that. We don't want that. That's going to make our battle even harder. So we need to not be scared. We need to come out of the grow closet, and we need to tell everybody everything we know about cannabis to change the public opinion, because this is a hearts and minds effort. As soon as we can change public opinion, and it's massive, and there's the tipping point, then we're on to a winner. We can't lose after that. But until then, we just have to keep planting a seed in the minds and planting a seed in the ground.
Amazing story.
Thank you.
Has the cancer all gone, and what did your the medical world have to say about it?
Honestly, eventually Darren now has an oncologist who refuses to see me. And actually refuses to see Darren most of the time. He sends new people, because when my book came out and Darren was 17 and I actually felt brave enough, I slapped it on his table and he went, "Oh, you're going to want to talk about that." And I said, "Yeah, I am." And he literally put his fingers in his ears and said, "I don't want to know. I don't want to know. I don't want to." And I looked at him and I said, "What are you doing?" I said, "You've got 60 patients out there." I said, "You call yourself a doctor. You're not a doctor. You're a butcher." I said, "If it helps him, then it's going to help them. And how can you stick your fingers in your ears like that and not even want to open a dialogue about this? Come on." And so I found it really frustrating. But Darren will tell you that he stood there. Darren, do you want to stand up so people know who you are? Darren stood there. I have created somewhat of a monster, because he stood over his doctor's shoulder the last time I saw him and said, I want cannabis put on my records, as that's what I had in that hospice. I want it on there. And the doctor wrote, "Darren believes that." No, I don't believe. Put it on there. So, and also the same doctor, so he had avascular necrosis in his femur, which is where the ends of the bone went necrotic because of over-steroid use. The blood flow couldn't get to the bone. And they told me that if he were to survive, that in 5 years he'd need a knee replacement, because you can't repair dead bone. So Darren went in, had an MRI about a year ago, and I was called in, and the doctor said, "I believe you were under the impression that Darren had avascular necrosis." I said, no, I'm not under the impression. I've got the scans. Do you want to see them? And he said, well, this is impossible. And I said, oh, you're going to tell me it's gone? And he said, well, I don't see this in any of my other patients. And I said, no, none of your other patients are taking cannabis, all are they? And he said, I knew you'd say that. And I said, yeah, and I'm going to keep saying it because it's the only reason why he's still standing here today. So, but as far as the cancers, he's been in remission for those for a number of years now. But both cancers actually came for his bone marrow, so hence why the bone marrow transplant. So I firmly believe that this is a massive part as to why the cancers are not returning, because they told me that because of the amount of chemotherapy and radiotherapy they gave him as much as they could without killing him, because he was a guinea pig. They had no protocol. So they said, within 5 years, he'll have cancer again. He'll have cataracts. He'll have heart failure. He'll have this. He'll have that. We're now looking at the long-term side effects of the delayed reactions, delayed reactions to chemotherapy. His organs are in better condition than they were. His eyesight is perfect. His knee has healed. On all these things, and his hand is great. And they're looking at him saying, we can't understand this. And he's saying, cannabis, for goodness sake. So, this is another reason why I keep him on the oil every single day as well, because I'm not going to risk taking that oil away and finding out that that's what was keeping his cancers away. That's not happening.
Any more questions? Oh, we have one more.
And it's not simple.
My anxiety is through the roof, so it doesn't matter.
Oh, don't worry, mate.
No, it's cool, bro. Right, so your story is similar to, I had a tumour in 2008.
Can you lift that so I can hear you?
That's better, sorry.
Thank you.
So yeah, obviously I've followed you and your story for a couple of years.
Thank
I had
you.
a similar thing with my own bowel tumour in 2008, switched to cannabis. I'm now 42, mate, I'm good as gold.
Well done.
Since then, we've opened a shop down in Swanage, re-educating most people, trying to tell them there's different ways, getting them onto CBD. Again, like you, flooded cancers, RSOs. Luckily, in Dorset Police, they're quite pro the plants,
Good.
so we get left alone quite
Good.
a bit. We get quite a lot of growing advice, people pro-grow down there, so again, mate, I just wanted to say thanks. I just wanted to say thanks. And,
You're welcome. You're
yeah,
welcome.
nice
And I'm
one.
really pleased for you. I'm really, really pleased for
Yeah.
you. Keep doing what you're doing.
Yeah, same.
Thanks
Thanks very much, mate.
Thank you.
Mine is actually not a question. Just well done. It's fantastic.
Thank you.
I was thinking, I hope this is a good ending. It must be a good ending. Come on, and he's sitting right there. Congratulations, mate. Okay.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Any more questions? Well, Callie,
He's got another one.
he's determined not to let us go, is he?
I honestly didn't put him there and ask.
What does the future hold for Callie Blackwell?
Oh God, can you tell me? I have no idea. So I try to do as many events as this as I possibly can, because I fully believe that with this comes education and inspiration and motivation, and we can then get more and more people doing what we all need to be doing. So I'm really trying to concentrate on talking, doing a lot of talking, and I'm going to America in November. They've asked me to talk at the Emerald Cup, which is like the biggest cannabis cup in the world. It's more of a recreational side, but I'm in for that. I'm really looking forward to that. But I'm going to try and make talks all across America, because unfortunately, where we think America is like the land of free weed, it's really not. What's happening in America at the moment is horrendous. It's really horrendous. And that's another thing. We've got to look at America and make sure we don't let them do what they're doing there, here, because it's going to kill people. And so I've been asked to go to America and talk across America and try and inspire their movement too. So yeah, watch this space. Thank you very much.
Well, Callie, thank you very much for sharing your story. It's the first time I've heard it, and I found it very touching.
Oh, thank you very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for coming, and can I have a round of applause, please, for Callie once again.